A very good evening to our viewers. Thank you for joining us tonight on the agenda. My name is Taiwan Jebela. Tonight on the show we are joined by Vita Angula. He is a journalist writing mostly for international publications, and we are here to discuss. He's also a commentator generally on current affairs, and we are just here to have a conversation around a number of issues that have been reported in the media lately. Thank you, Vita, for making time. I think the first thing that I wanted us to discuss is the impasse around Michael Amushelelo. We have seen the EFF in South Africa issuing a statement on Thursday. We have seen campaigns online, people saying free Amushelelo. We have also seen bits and pieces of information suggesting that he has gone on a hunger strike. What have you made of the Amushelelo saga all along, irrespective of what has been in the papers this past week?
Thank you very much. With Amushelelo, I deeply sympathize with him. He's an activist that actually took activism to the core, challenging the power structure in terms of how employees are treated. If I recall correctly, they took somebody's coffin to ShopRite, and he was arrested for that. And then he was denied bail on the basis that he was arrested previously for organizing a similar event. So it speaks to the constitutional right of activists to pursue their causes, because both of the things are activism, but the last time he did not have permission from the police to demonstrate on the 21st of March, which is our Independence Day. Now, I mean, activism is not a bed of roses. As an activist, you take chances. And I just feel that even the judge who gave that order to say that, no, you cannot do similar things, it encroaches on his fundamental right to free speech. I don't know which other maybe laws that I can cite, but it's really a infringement on the basic right to protest. And the things that Amushelelo is protesting about is not necessarily things that affect him. We know him as an entrepreneur who can relatively make his own money. He can basically survive. He's not a needy individual, but he sees for himself and he sees for his constituency that there is a problem, and I think it affects him because the more people are making in the community, the more there is for an entrepreneur. And he was just speaking employee rights. He was talking about, I think that's the one that got him into trouble. And then I don't know whether he was also speaking about land, but these are things that don't affect only Amushelelo, it affects the broader society. And he was speaking out, and I just don't know why the law came so harsh on him or why he's being denied bail, because you get arrested and then you have to appear in court. He's a Namibian citizen. So you are keeping him in jail, and I don't know if that offense will have a direct jail term. So they could have arrested him and given him bail so that he can come in court and now explain himself. But the fact that they're keeping him in jail, I think they are just sending a message to the broader youth that, look, your activism has consequences. That's what I make of it.
Yeah. I mean,
political intimidation, to sum it up.
Yeah. Some people have called it persecution, that he's being politically persecuted now, because we know also he has a very sharp tongue. He has said a lot of things against the establishment, if you like. And there's a sense, even in the EFF statement, the general sense of that statement is suggesting that they feel that our courts are actually being influenced politically. What are your thoughts on that?
When I see the timeline of events, Amushelelo's arrest is just after he started, I'll call it bullying, the Inspector General of the police that the Inspector General was in a car accident and he killed people A, B, and C. That is a matter for the court. It's not for Amushelelo to comment on that, because accidents happen. Sometimes an accident can happen because of negligence. Sometimes an accident is just an accident. So Amushelelo used his political clout now to attack the Inspector General of the Namibian police. So obviously in the public it will just be seen as a prosecution that now the police is coming after him. But the police is not the court. The people who denied Amushelelo bail is the court. It's not the Namibian police. But yes, in the public, the way people read things is not always where people are. The way I read something is not necessarily the way it is. But Amushelelo was wrong in that regard. But I also read a story where the police inspector general said, "I'm not the court." But people tie these things together and then they make up their own opinions. But yeah, there's opinion and then there's fact, and that's why I believe that Amushelelo must be at least granted bail so that he can even raise money, so that he can also pay his lawyers, so that he can defend himself. They are actually undermining the law by taking away his capacity to actually defend himself.
Yeah. No, but that is exactly what I'm saying, that, okay, it's one thing for the Inspector General to say, look, I'm not involved, the courts are a different institution, but the courts themselves are being accused of playing politics now. For example, we are being told sometimes that the reason why he has not been given bail is because he's a repeat offender, if you like. But you can't be declared an offender until you've actually been found guilty.
Exactly.
So to say, oh, you were arrested, because also, really, the man was arrested, this was the 4th time this year. Between January and March, he was arrested 4 times. And every time he got bail, there was this condition that, you may not do this again. But even to me as a layman in law, if somebody is found, is granted bail before trial, because usually you would say, okay, fine, you've been found guilty, do not repeat this offense again. But we don't even know that he was going to get found guilty on those 3 other arrests. So we can't say now, because of those arrests, we must now use them to punish him this time around. That is where my difficulty is, really.
Yeah, Trevo, go even on the court roll. I work as a journalist, so every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I go to the court, and I check court cases. People, repeat offenders of robbery. This guy is in front of the judge for the 8th time, 20th time. But that has never been raised as a reason, because you are given the benefit of the doubt. So we know the criminals in our society, and we know how the courts are lenient to them. Michael Amushelelo is a political activist. All his crimes are political. Why is it? They are political, but they are also, the word for it, I'm trying to find the word, his crimes, a person can understand why he would do such a thing, and he represents a view of a very important segment of our population, which are youth and who are unemployed. Why are you treating him so harshly, but those people who are stealing people's cell phones, breaking into people's houses, repeat offenders who are sometimes raping or beating their wives, you don't show them that same harshness that you are showing Amushelelo? So it also talks to our justice system and what it tolerates and what it does not tolerate. What it's saying that, okay, a crime of stealing or breaking into people's houses, that can still be tolerated. But any dissenting view that wants to challenge the authority of the state, that one will never be tolerated. That is what is actually playing out in the public eye.
Yeah. So when you see parties like EFF, which has a huge following, is the 3rd largest party in South Africa in terms of the votes from the previous election, and we have seen the Amushelelo thing, also transcending borders now. There are people abroad who are now monitoring this situation. Is it worth to punish the man? Because for me, I'm very clear in my view. For me, he's being punished by powerful people, whoever they are. But is that worth risking the reputation of our country in the eyes of the international observers? Because when you have these statements coming from South Africa and Zambia, Joseph Kalimbe and other people saying stuff like that, you know, there's a spotlight now being put on our country, and not in the most positive way.
With the EFF, I don't understand, because we have EFF in South Africa, then we have Namibia EFF, but ideologically they seem to differ. Like, let me tell you something, the EFF of South Africa is accommodating of the LGBTQ community.
Yes.
That is their political stance.
Yes.
The president of Namibia EFF goes into parliament and uses his parliamentary immunity to pick on somebody from the LGBT community. So is Namibia EFF really a branch of EFF South Africa? Or are they an organization on their own which is backpedaling on the popularity of EFF to call themselves Namibia EFF? Because politically, it seems that, and ideologically, Namibia EFF is not aligned to the EFF of South Africa. But your question, for me, it becomes problematic that you are saying the international community. Namibia is in a bad light in the international community. That should not even become a question. Is Namibia in the bad light with Namibians themselves? Because before we start looking outwards, we have to look inwards. You cannot want to portray a good image in the public when you know inside that you are not good. So the issue at hand is Michael Amushelelo being politically prosecuted? In my opinion, yes. Is he being politically prosecuted for the right or wrong reasons? My answer would be he's being politically prosecuted for the wrong reasons. Is this a good or a bad thing? No, it's a bad thing. Morally and ethically, is it right or wrong? No, it is wrong. And that should be the basis of our engagement, not what other people think of us. They can think whatever, but are we doing the correct things? And I think we are not doing the correct things.
Yeah. Look, I think, Vita, we cannot entirely be oblivious to the need for our country to be also perceived positive. Of course, I think Namibians themselves are aware of what is happening in this particular matter. Our views, the views that are both pro his incarceration and anti-incarceration, I think they've been very clear. But we are also a country that likes portraying ourselves in a particular light, broadly, abroad. If the president goes to the UN, he talks about how Namibia is one of the shining democracies, it's a free society, we have freed ourselves, and we have now installed values that we've been demanding. So there's an element of that. And also the reason why we cannot ignore the international part of it is because there are also punitive things that can happen by the outsiders who say, okay, Namibia is maybe undemocratic, and therefore in terms of aligning with them or their ambitions or even assisting them, we don't want to associate with them. So there are also those implications. Of course, I believe, like you're right, that priority is ourselves as a country, but we also cannot entirely ignore how the outside world perceives us. Yeah.
There is something that came to my attention. I think it was last week. It was about supply chain due diligence. So I think it's an act they are trying to bring out in Europe, whereby if you are doing business, Namibia trades internationally mostly in commodities. So they want to have source countries who also uphold democratic values. That will be one of their markers. So even with the Amushelelo case, this can be brought up that, okay, look, we want to invest in Namibia, we want to have a green hydrogen, A, B, and C, but how does Namibia rank in human rights?
Yeah.
And I think also with the case of Michael Amushelelo, it's clearly a case of a human right violation and not respecting due process as understood in the court. And I was having a heated exchange with the people from the NIPDB, Namibia Investment Board, something to that effect, whereby they want to put something on, they want to put the branding of Namibia on tender to and it's open for international bidding. And I'm like, who best to tell the Namibian stories than Namibians themselves? But at the same time, the brand equity, how will you measure your brand equity? And if you pay somebody 5 million to come up with the brand concept of Namibia, oh, Namibia is a country that respects the rule of law, A, B, and C. How do you guard against that? Like an issue like Michael Amushelelo, if it draws international condemnation, that works against your brand. So how do you even brand a country? Let's talk about something that is being peddled, an idea being peddled in Parliament, which is the culling of seals to decrease their numbers, because the fishing industry feels that the seals are decreasing fish stocks. Something like that can damage the reputation of the country. So if NIPD says, okay, we want to brand the country in a certain way, you can brand it in a certain way, but the things on the ground, they will make your efforts even futile.
I hear you. Yeah, so, and I want to move away now from the Amushelelo thing, but again, for me, is that there are things like gay rights, same-sex things that are being talked about now, and you could some would argue that that is a bigger issue, and if we are going to protect our values as a country at the cost of international how we are perceived by the international community, we can sacrifice on that one, because to us it's a non-negotiable thing. And that's why I'm saying that the Amushelelo thing is not worth, for me, the risk that we are busy attracting upon our country. It's an individual who ought to be released, really, and whatever. It's just a young man, not really worth all the attention that we are now busy attracting. But on something like same-sex marriages, you could say, yes, like Uganda took a very, very strong stance, attracting the US, for example, saying, we are going to cut you off from some of the aid and whatnot. And the Ugandans are saying, look, here we are prepared. It's a big issue for us. It's not an individual in jail. This one is a big issue for us. And if that is the price that we are going to pay, we are prepared to pay that. So when I'm weighing those two issues, at least I see that this one of Amushelelo is not worth to drag our country into the mud in the manner that it has done so far. But speaking of same-sex marriages, we've seen that this issue is still carrying on. There were big news now. It sailed through again through Parliament, the two houses. What is your take on this issue in general?
For me, it brings to my attention the question of nation building in Namibia. Does Namibia really have a national identity? When that's a question that arises. If you go maybe the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which is run on the principles of the Quran, and then the Quran is against homosexuality, and people kind of accept that homosexuality is something which is wrong, and they are not in support of it. But in Namibia, there are people who say, okay, homosexuality is okay. There are people who say it's right. There are people who say that it is wrong. My experience growing up, we always saw that there was this boy in the in our class who acted more like a girl, and then there was also a girl in our class who acted more like a boy, and they were accepted. They were made fun of in that regard, but Namibians, they make fun of people for any reason. I've always seen on the LGBTQ that they are a welcome part of our society. There is no active discrimination. And I was having this conversation with somebody yesterday, was asking, now how did it all of a sudden become a big deal? No, it became a big deal because now they want marriage and they want the same rights as everybody else. Now, our Namibian constitution is based on equal rights. So if I'm interested in you and you decide, no, you want to divorce your wife, then you want to marry me, are we not supposed to have, and maybe you die, am I not supposed to have the same rights as somebody else in terms of inheritance and A, B, and C? So that is the question which has not been addressed in public. People just see LGBTQ rights as, oh, people want to engage in, it's only the sexual aspect which has received attention. Mm-hmm. But when you are talking about LGBTQ rights, it's the right to a family, the right to inheritance. If I go to Old Mutual and I want to buy a house, a property, and I say I'm married to Toivo, they'll say, no, two men cannot marry each other. But somebody else who is married to a female, or Toivo is married now to his wife, who is a genetically born female, as now the definition is, they are allowed to purchase. So is it fair? And in Namibia, we don't have a national identity, really, to say per se. Some people are for, some people are against, some people are anti-LGBTQ, some people are pro, some people just don't have an opinion.
What is your own opinion?
It's tricky. I grew up, I have even in my own family people who do identify as LGBTQ. For me, they haven't harmed me in any way. But if somebody close to me was exhibiting maybe LGBTQ tendencies, I would not support it. But as long as it's happening far, I'm okay. But when it comes close to home, say your son or your brother says, no, they want to marry another man, you'll be like, no, but you are bringing things onto the family, A, B, and C. So I'm not for, I'm not against, I'm just on the fence, but at the end of the day, really, it doesn't really concern me. It's an issue where people can get very, very much feelings, people catch feelings on that issue. So even to say I'm for, people will say, oh, now it's just because you are gay, that's why you are supporting. If you say you are against, people say, yeah, you are homophobic, what. If you say you are on the fence, people say, yeah, it's good.
Yeah. I think the main challenge here, Vita, is that the Constitution says we are all equal. We are all equal in the Constitution, and then you also have the definition of democracy to say that the majority of Namibians generally do not accept this orientation. Not very much the orientation, but now the next steps now, same sex now, marriages and stuff like that. So do you then subject this minority group to the tyranny of the majority, as some call it, as some call it, meaning that you go with the democracy to say democracy is the rule by the majority, or do you say, okay, the majority can wait because the Constitution itself says all of us, including those that are in the minorities, must enjoy the full rights like anybody else?
They say the purpose of democracy is to protect the minority from the tyranny of the majority. But at times also the minorities, they can also become a tyranny on the majority. So, I mean, with the LGBTQ, I don't know, do you know a guy, his name is Khabib Nurmagomedov. He's a fighter, he's a UFC fighter. a devout Muslim.
Is it the Russian guy?
Yeah, he's Russian, but he's actually from Kazakhstan, or so one of those, Chechnya or something. Yeah, Chechnya.
I know him, yes.
He's a devout Muslim, so at the end of the day, he says, okay, we send our children to school in a public school system. We are entrusting our teachers, the teachers, to teach our children according to our moral values or standards. So now you have a teacher maybe who identifies as LGBTQ. Maybe let's say he's a gay man or a homosexual man. Now you are a parent and you are entrusting your hands, the future of your child in this person, and your child spends 8 hours of the day with this person. Now you are anti-LGBTQ. Now the constitution of the country is saying people are free to be who they are. Now it becomes a problem for you as a parent if you cannot afford to take your child maybe to a private school. You want your child to be in the public school system, but now there's this teacher who identifies as LGBTQ that you don't agree with, and you don't want that person to teach your child. So now it becomes more personal and more dynamic. And I think that's maybe where the tyranny of the LGBTQ community comes in, that look, people don't really have a problem. It only becomes a problem when your ideals now encroach on my freedoms. Like I've got, so somebody can ask, as much as somebody has the right to be LGBTQ, do people have not the juxtaposed, but the corresponding right to be anti-LGBTQ?
Yes. We go for a break and then return with Vita Angula.
Neopaints has established a 67-year Namibian legacy, creating personalized paint solutions that blend quality and innovation for the Namibian people. We pride ourselves in being a 100% Namibian-owned company, investing in our country and our people by employing and empowering true Namibians. With every brushstroke, Neopaints commits to our quality guarantee and always delivering a coat of excellence. At Neopaints, we always stay true to our country. We are as Namibian as you.
Hello and welcome to today's Sports Rep Show.
I am your host, Jesse Jackson Kauraifa. In replay, Namibia, who had won the toss for the first time on this tour.
Good day everyone, time for international sports news, starting off with tennis news, both on the WTA for women's and
The show continues. So the again, just to close the subject on gay rights, the jury bills are going through. Looks like it. The president. What I find very interesting in the coming weeks will be that President Geingob is perceived to be generally receptive of equal rights, including those of the gay people. But we also have the Attorney General fighting in courts against the removal of sodomy. And in his arguments, he's been making very strong arguments that homosexuality is not generally accepted in Namibia. So apart from sodomy, the whole orientation generally doesn't really speak to the values of many Namibians. So, and when the last time we spoke to the president's office, they said, yeah, the bills are on his desk. He's now just waiting for Mbandeka's legal opinion to advise him whether to sign or not. So you have these two figureheads, one seen to be receptive, another one seems to be the other way around. What do you expect to see happening in this regard? Will Hage Geingob sign?
Yeah, he has this to sign because the parliament is a representative of the Namibian people, and then every 5 years we are allowed to vote for our lawmakers, and they made a law, so the president is not a power on himself. The attorney general, I think, is appointed by the president, so he serves at the pleasure of the president, and I think with a 5-year contract, so he's not he's not a direct representative as much as the president is, but the president is also directly voted by the people of Namibia. So the people of Namibia actually said, no, this is the new definition of marriage, and the president has to sign. He's there on the delegation of the Namibian people. We should never allow the president to think that he is a power or to himself, or that he's a representative of himself. So his values and his own beliefs must take a backseat to the will of the Namibian people, and I think that's how the will of the Namibian people has expressed, and that is the oath he swore to upkeep.
Yeah. The other aspect related to that is that so I personally understand very much that okay, let's redefine the word spouse in the Immigration Act to give it meaning that speaks to the aspirations of the majority of Namibians. And then but there are clauses in these bills that are troubling me. For example, there are clauses that say if you are seen to advocate for homosexuality, or same-sex marriages, that you'll be fined or even jailed.
It's in which act?
In one of these private bills of
I haven't seen
Jerry
it.
Kanjo, and there's a provision like that anybody who, so the bill is against same-sex marriages, against the advocacy of same-sex marriages, and that part is the one that is troubling me, to say, look, because it implies that if you are found carrying a placard saying legalize same-sex marriages, you are bound to get arrested. That infringes on the core principle of free speech. You can say no. If you don't want my placard message to go through, you can just say no. But to arrest me for expressing a view, that's very dangerous.
I haven't seen that, so I can't really comment on it. I haven't seen it.
Fair enough, I understand that. I think in closing, Vita, let's talk about, you are a journalist. There's a union of journalists that this week has been in the papers talking about exploitation of journalists in the country. Some apparently do not have even written contracts. They get paid at the whims and behest of their bosses. There are also allegations of sexual harassment. There isn't much that has really come out, even in the New Era article that I saw this week, citing the Namibian newspaper as one of the places affected by that. I was really looking forward to the article, and when I read it, there were not specifics being alluded to in terms of that. But again, I'm not playing it down. I think it's a genuine concern. But in terms of exploitation, that one pops up now and again. Do you think it exists, or is it a figment of imagination?
No, in the Namibia, I have a personal experience. There is definitely an exploitation, but at the end of the day, that is more contractual. So from the side of the media bosses and the media houses, if I can give an example of my own personal experience, was that every time I was given a freelance gig by any newspaper in Namibia, I was meant to have a contract, but it's only a verbal contract that says that I cannot work for any other media house. And for me, that was exploitative, because now you confine me. Media is so broad. I can do TV, I can do radio, I can do print, A, B, and C. Now you confine me to a small salary, which is maybe 6,000. But if I can freelance for 10 different people, I can actually get 60,000. So why would somebody give you a contract like that? Is because they understand your brand value, and that if you are with their institution, you can bring in value for them. So they don't want you sharing that with another institution. But then if you recognize somebody's brand value, at least allow them also to make a living for themselves, because $6,000 in Namibian economy, it can take you only so far. That does not even cover rent in a nice area. So why subject people to that? But then also the fault I feel with the journalists is that they do not upskill. So journalists, they are comfortable enough to come to work every day from 8 to 5, working for the Namibian Sun, and then wanting maybe a salary increment of 5%. But can Namibian Sun afford to give you what you are demanding? We know that, yes, to live relatively a good life in Namibia, at least if you have 35,000 per month, okay. And if maybe your spouse has 35,000 per month and you have a combined income of 70,000, you can live comfortably well. Now you are complaining that, okay, no, I'm only earning 15 or 18,000, but that is what the market can afford, and that is what everybody else is paying. So you can fight with Toivo, and you can say, yeah, Toivo is an editor, he doesn't want to give an increase. But is even Toivo happy with his own salary? There's nobody who is happy with the salary. And we have seen it. If you look at the Namibian Sun, I know I always make fun of you. Look, 8 pages, and it's because of printing cost, it's distribution cost. I mean, to run an organization like the Namibian Sun is it's not easy. It's a cost element. So even
it's 24 pages though. It's 24 pages.
Yeah, it's 24. So even
but I get your point.
Yes, even if you want, if you say no, Vita, he deserves 25,000 per month. Yes, it's fair, but can you afford it? And advertisers are not there. Social media has taken everything over everything. People cannot. I don't buy a newspaper. I read online for free. My data that I pay for MTC, it pays for my news. So media also, we have to transform, we have to innovate, we have to get with the times. I can complain all I want. Yeah, Toivo doesn't want to pay me. Gwen Lista Tangeni doesn't want to pay me. Hamata doesn't want to pay me. New Era doesn't want to pay me. You can complain, but if you don't innovate, and I think that's one of the things, capitalism, it allows for innovation. So you have to upskill as a journalist. You cannot say, no, I'm a reporter. You have to learn how to do camera work. You have to learn how to edit, or at least pay people to do that. You have to look for opportunities, not just in Namibia or in Windhoek. You have to go into Africa, you have to go to the world. But media houses must not stop journalists from pursuing other opportunities. I was talking to a journalist today. She works full-time for a media institution, and she got now a freelancing gig with an international. And she brought it. She was transparent. She brought it to her editor. Look, I got this international gig. And the editor is like, no, you can't do that, because what, you are competing with us. And she's only paid so much by this media house. If I was the editor, I would say, look, go for it. Go and make your money grow. But we don't have that support within our own media. We don't. I feel like sometimes editors in Namibia and owners of media houses, they are not supportive. I started freelancing for Voice of America 2 years ago, and Voice of America recommended me to TRT World. So I'm doing news, I'm doing TV packages. I only do radio packages for Voice of America, but I'm doing TV packages for TRT World.
Yeah.
And that is my editor who recommended me. So I used to have a very bad relationship with him, but that was professional differences. But he has actually honed me, and he taught me a lot, to the point where he can even recommend me, and that for me it's a good thing. And I wish more editors in Namibia can be more supportive of their staff. Build your staff and let them go to go and flourish somewhere else. And it actually it helps your brand if somebody can go out and say, you know, I once worked for the Namibian Sun and they opened the doors for me. Everybody will want to come to the Namibian Sun. But if you have people who are working for the Namibian Sun and they are the ones always on the phone with other people, we are not getting paid, it's bad for the company.
I agree. Look, I think you've made a very good point in the size of our industry. It's not a profit. It's not a very profitable industry. The majority of media houses in our country barely break even. So it's not it's not massive profits. So sometimes, and also I've said time and again that maybe the media industry should be in tiers. You work for this company and it's classified as a tier 1 company, tier 2, because some of the companies are really small and they can only afford that. It happens everywhere. In the SOE space, you have tier 1, your NAMPAWAs, your MTCs, and then you have NAMPA, which is a small entity, and you can't say because you're on a D band here, you must be paid as a D band guy at Telecom. So that point is very fair that you've made. On freelancing, I think that the question with us as editors most of the time is, okay, if you are freelancing locally, how do you decide what to give me and what to give to my competitor? Are you going to give me the weaker story and give the stronger one to the other publication? But I think where you say, okay, work for us at Namibian Sun, but internationally, because I'm not in competition with BBC, not necessarily, or CNN or whatever. So I think there we can find each other halfway and say, okay, let's have a give and take situation and allow you to do that. The difficulty, I think, is when you want to work for Namibian Sun and the Namibian at the same time. That would be difficult for me.
Namibian Sun, if you read it every day, and the Namibian, they have different editorial policies.
Not really. No.
Yes.
The news, we all go to the same. We all go to the same parliament. When those bills of Jerry Kanjo are tabled, we all go there. When the president addresses the nation, State of the Nation address, we all go there. Of course, there are bits and pieces where you find different stories only here. There's exclusive stories, but generally the stories are the same, really.
No, they are not the same.
I can tell you that.
Let me tell you something. A journalist who is good at their job, for example, me, if you're on the group, let's say you're the MEFT group, and you get a press release from Mr. Romeo Muyunda, and you can take 20 angles with that story. But the problem, the quality, the journalism field, I think it's lost its best people because of low pay, that you don't have anybody who can actually think. The moment Romeo gives a press release, you copy and paste, you'll see it in the Namibian Sun. Mr. Muyunda gave a press release that there is a
poaching.
Not poaching, there's an increase on attack on tourists in the country, and it's disturbing. And I went and I asked the police, what is the, can you give me statistics for attack on tourists since before COVID-19, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022?
Yes.
And I saw that there has been a decrease in attacks on tourists, whereby I think 2021, there was only one robbery against a tourist, but no other journalist could pick that up. But if I, a good journalist, and I take that angle, I would probably give it to the Namibian Sun and not to the Namibian.
But that is exactly the point I'm making, Vita, to say you go an extra mile, you dig up more details, you give your story, that Romeo Miunda's press release, you gave it more weight. You do that article. It's the strongest article from that press release. And then you give it to someone else. And then you do, because the press release, of course, you can do 2 stories out of it. Another one is on something a bit weaker. That cannot make my front page. It's a page 4 story. So that is where the conflict is, that to say now, okay, you freelance for both of us, you went hard on one angle, did a good story, gave it to my competitor, then you give me a weaker story. That is where its complications is, the complication is. But I get your point. I think as editors, we must really help journalists to thrive, knowing, and personally I try to say, you know, if you freelance, here are the parameters. This is your obligations towards me, and then the rest can go elsewhere.
Okay, let me give you my example with freelancing in international. I can give a good story. I believe this story is so good. I pitch it to my editor, and he'll tell me no, I can't. And I pitch the exact same story to the next editor, and they're like, yeah, when can I have this? So it's also knowing the editorial policy of who you work for, and you can only get better. And I'm telling you, Trevor, if you pay a journalist well, he will always bring you the nice stories, and your newspaper will always be good, because people will go where the money is. That improves the quality of everybody.
Yeah, but Vita, that is the point I'm making. If I'm the one who pays more, I'm likely to get better stories from you. If I am a smaller publication, and we know which ones are smaller in the country, and you freelance for them, they get the weaker stories. I, as an editor, wouldn't want to accept the weaker story. I want the best stories, but sometimes I can't afford you. So instead of engaging in conflicts with you, I would rather say, look, you either work for me full time, or you work for whoever is paying much higher. It's a very, very small industry in our country. It's globally, the media is a big business, but in our country, it's a very small enterprise. So it leaves us with those question marks. But it's not even about those debates now. I think really, and even us at the Editors Forum of Namibia, I think we must come up with some framework to say, given the reality in our industry where people are not paid really big money, and the newspapers and the whole media houses are not making a lot of money, how do we help our employees to live by?
It's training. Like I said, journalists, and as an editor you can only do so much, but as a journalist you have to upscale yourself. You have to constantly
upscaling is in terms of what? Academically or just the technical?
Technical. Media is very technical. So if I'm writing print for Namibian Sun under Toivo, I'm sure if I'm doing a TV package for NBC, which Toivo doesn't do, they wouldn't mind. And if I have a radio gig, let me say at maybe Eagle FM, I'm sure Toivo wouldn't mind. And then if I do maybe blogging for some tourism company, it's not in direct competition. But then we have journalists who are so attached to say, no, I only do reporting, I can only write what. Yeah, you can't. It is to your own detriment.
No,
you have to upskill.
Those examples are good. If you work for a newspaper, and then on Saturday you work as a, let's assume that you work as an entertainment reporter for a newspaper, and then on Saturday you present a music show on Radio Energy or whatever, there isn't really conflict there. Yeah, so under those circumstances, it's good. The problem is when you want to work for Eagle FM and Desert Radio,
Obviously,
you know, then it becomes a bit of a thing. But elsewhere in the world where the industries are big, you have a guy who's a TV anchor for CNN, and then he also does this for another station. But yeah, I think the principle is correct. Yeah. Any concluding remarks, Vita, in that regard? How do we move forward? Because the reality is that
the media, I believe we have to innovate. I was made to understand. I had the similar problems, like, yeah, you're not getting paid enough. This person is stingy. But I had to look at the reality. How is the industry doing? And I feel like media has not really evolved, and also our quality is, because we are competing against social media. Nobody really needs us. But with that, because we are paying so low salaries, the best people are leaving the industry. So you are left, like Gwen Lister likes saying, there's no quality in the newsroom. You get somebody who is at an event and he hears that the minister is saying that 13 horses were bought for 130,000. And then you go and write that, no, these horses were procured for 1.3 million. And even your editor still publish. There's no fact checking. That is a fact. Any editor must look over the facts to ensure. And those are the things that make media people look silly. So we've got a reputation that we make up stories and what. And yeah, and another thing I wanted to
briefly
to talk about is that paternal relationship that we have, media with the government, whereby you are calling a minister for an interview, then the minister is telling you, no, I'm even the same age as your mother. I could have been your mother. And you are like, dude, comrade honorable, I'm doing my job. You cannot tell me that. So also the politicians have to be told also, no, respected journalists, this person is doing their job. You don't point fingers, you don't call people that, no, I'm older than you, I'm the same age as your mom. You don't tell people, no, journalists are like flies and A, B, and C. Yeah. So that paternalistic relationship that we have, whereby journalists have to always make themselves small when speaking to politicians, it must be addressed. And yeah, we are there to hold the political office bearers to account.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Vita, for making time.
Okay.
Yeah, that was Vita Angula. He's a journalist, freelance journalist, and also social commentator. Thank you for watching.